Most people think they want to be understood. But if you've spent years explaining yourself to people and still feeling unseen, then you've probably started asking a different question. Why does it matter so much? Why does a misunderstanding from the wrong person stay in your head for days? Why do you keep replaying conversations, rewriting explanations, searching for the perfect words that will finally make someone see what you meant? And what if the real problem isn't that people don't understand you at all? What if it's that you've unknowingly tied your peace to their ability to do so? Part of what makes this so exhausting is that you usually aren't trying to be understood by people who are genuinely interested in understanding you. You're trying to be understood by people who have already decided who you are. A parent who only sees the version of you they created years ago. A friend who benefits from misunderstanding your boundaries. A partner who hears your words but filters them through their own fears. Yet you keep explaining because some part of you believes that if you can just find the right words, the right example, the right conversation, everything will finally make sense, and every failed attempt leaves you feeling more frustrated than the last. The belief sounds reasonable on the surface. If people understood your intentions, they wouldn't judge you unfairly. If they understood your motives, they wouldn't question your decisions. If they understood your struggles, they would finally treat you differently. But this belief hides a dangerous assumption. It assumes that understanding automatically leads to acceptance. It assumes that other people are withholding respect because they lack information. Yet if you've lived long enough, you've already seen evidence that this isn't true. Some people understand you perfectly and still disagree with you. Some understand you and still leave. Some understand you and still choose themselves. So why do you keep chasing understanding as if it guarantees a different outcome? Because the pursuit of understanding is often hiding a deeper need. Most people are not chasing understanding. They are chasing relief. Relief from being judged. Relief from being mischaracterized. Relief from feeling invisible. They imagine that if the other person finally understands, the tension will disappear. The problem is that this turns understanding into a form of emotional dependence. Your emotional state becomes tied to another person's perception of you. And the moment your peace depends on how someone else sees you, you've handed them a level of influence over your life that they never earned. This is why certain conversations never end. You explain your position. The other person disagrees. You explain it again with more detail. They still don't see it. So you provide examples, context, evidence, history. Before long, the discussion is no longer about the original issue. It has become a desperate attempt to secure validation through understanding. You are no longer communicating. You are negotiating for permission to feel at peace. And that is why these interactions leave you mentally exhausted. The exhaustion isn't coming from the conversation itself. It's coming from the invisible dependence underneath it. What makes this even harder to recognize is that society often rewards the behavior. You're told to communicate more, explain yourself better, clarify your intentions, make sure people know where you're coming from. And in healthy situations, that advice has value. But many of the people causing the deepest frustration in your life are not confused. They simply see things differently. Some are invested in their version of the story. Some benefit from misunderstanding you. Some have no interest in changing their perspective, because doing so would require them to question themselves. The more you explain, the more trapped you become in a game that was never designed to be won. The first sign that you're beginning to outgrow this pattern is surprisingly uncomfortable. You start realizing that many people already understand more than you think. They understand that you're hurt. They understand that you're frustrated. They understand what you're asking for. They simply don't value it enough to respond the way you want. This realization can feel brutal because it removes the comforting belief that the problem is communication. But it also gives you something far more valuable: clarity. Once you stop assuming that understanding automatically creates change, you stop wasting energy trying to convince people who have already made their choice. This is the moment most people misunderstand. They think emotional independence means becoming cold, detached, uncaring. But emotional independence has nothing to do with caring less. It has everything to do with needing less. You can care deeply about someone and still accept that they may never fully understand you. You can explain yourself once, honestly and clearly, without feeling compelled to explain yourself 10 more times. The difference is that your sense of self is no longer hanging on their response. Their understanding becomes a preference, not a requirement, and that changes everything. You begin to notice something else. The people who possess the most quiet confidence rarely spend much time defending themselves. They are not constantly correcting every misunderstanding, chasing every false assumption, or fighting every inaccurate opinion. At first, this can look like indifference, but often it is something deeper. They understand that other people's perceptions are largely shaped by their own experiences, insecurities, desires, and biases. In other words, many of the opinions that trouble you have very little to do with you at all. Once you see this clearly, the urge to manage every perception starts losing its grip. One of the strangest shifts happens when you stop trying to control how others interpret you. You start seeing how much of your life was being spent managing impressions rather than living according to your values. You worried about being misunderstood because you believed misunderstanding would cost you something important: respect, connection, approval. But the more closely you examine your past, the more you realize that some of the people who understood you best still disappointed you, and some who misunderstood you completely had no real influence over your life. The connection between being understood and being fulfilled was never as strong as you imagined. This is why the need to be understood often creates a subtle form of captivity. You believe you are seeking clarity, but what you are really seeking is control. Control over how people see you. Control over the conclusions they draw. Control over the stories they tell themselves about your choices. The problem is that this control does not exist. No matter how articulate you become, every person will interpret you through the lens of their own mind. Some will admire qualities that others criticize. Some will see confidence where others see arrogance. Some will see strength where others see coldness. The moment you accept that interpretation belongs to them, you reclaim an enormous amount of energy that was never yours to spend. And this is where many people experience an unexpected sense of grief. Because once you stop chasing understanding, you are forced to confront a painful reality. Some people will never see you the way you hoped they would. Not because you failed to explain yourself, not because you lacked patience, not because you said the wrong thing, but because their version of you serves a purpose in their mind. Letting go of the need to be understood means letting go of the fantasy that one more conversation will finally transform the relationship. And every meaningful transformation begins with the death of a fantasy. If you've spent years explaining yourself, replaying conversations, and carrying the weight of being misunderstood, then you've probably already realized that the real struggle isn't communication. It's dependence. Dependence on other people's understanding, approval, and agreement to feel at peace with yourself. If that idea resonates with you, I put together a free private ebook called The Art of Strategic Indifference. It's written specifically for people who are trying to become emotionally independent, mentally disciplined, and difficult to manipulate. The ideas go much deeper than what we can cover in a single video. It's completely free, only available to viewers of this channel, and you'll find the link in the description. Comment clarity if this changed how you think about being understood. What follows is even more uncomfortable. When you stop needing to be understood, you start noticing how often your explanations were invitations for negotiation. You explained your boundaries so people would approve of them. You explained your decisions so people would support them. You explained your absence so people would forgive it. In many cases, the explanation was not information. It was a request for agreement, a request for permission, a request to avoid disapproval. And once you see this pattern, you begin to understand why certain people seem to have so much power over your emotions. They were unknowingly holding something you kept asking them to give. Eventually, you reach a point where you realize that self-respect and being understood are not the same thing. This is one of the most important distinctions a person can make. Self-respect is internal, understanding is external. One belongs to you, the other belongs to someone else. As long as you confuse the two, your confidence will remain vulnerable to other people's perceptions. Every misunderstanding will feel like a threat. Every criticism will feel like a verdict. Every rejection will feel like evidence that you need to explain yourself better. But once you separate these two things, something begins to change. You stop looking outward for confirmation of what you already know inwardly. The irony is that the less you need to be understood, the easier it becomes to communicate clearly. Desperation disappears from your words. You stop over-explaining. You stop repeating yourself. You stop filling silence with unnecessary justification. You simply express what is true and allow other people to do what they will with it. Some will understand, some won't. But your emotional state is no longer riding on the outcome. This creates a kind of calm that many people mistake for confidence. In reality, it is freedom. Freedom from the exhausting need to manage how every person interprets you. This is also the point where manipulation becomes much harder. People gain leverage over you when they discover a need you are unwilling to question. The need for approval, the need for validation, the need to be chosen, the need to be understood. Once someone realizes your peace depends on receiving one of these things, they can influence your behavior without ever issuing a direct command. But when you no longer require understanding from others to remain grounded in yourself, a source of leverage disappears. You become harder to guilt, harder to pressure, and much harder to control. There is another benefit that rarely gets discussed. When you stop needing to be understood, you stop giving every disagreement the power to become a personal crisis. You begin separating people's opinions from your identity. Someone can disagree with your decision without making it wrong. Someone can misunderstand your intentions without changing them. Someone can criticize your path without possessing a better one. This doesn't make criticism useless. It simply puts it in its proper place. Instead of treating every outside opinion as a verdict, you start treating it as information, sometimes useful, sometimes irrelevant, but no longer authoritative. You start realizing that many of the battles you fought in your mind were never actually happening in reality. They existed in imagined conversations, future explanations, hypothetical defenses, entire arguments rehearsed against people who were not even present. The need to be understood fuels this mental habit, because it convinces you that the perfect explanation is always one conversation away. But the moment you stop believing that, an enormous amount of mental noise begins to disappear. You spend less time preparing your defense and more time living your life. And for someone who has spent years trapped inside their own head, that silence feels almost unfamiliar. As this shift continues, you begin noticing something that once seemed impossible. The people whose opinions used to dominate your thoughts start occupying less and less space in your mind, not because they changed, not because they finally understood you, but because you stopped treating their understanding as a requirement for your peace. This is one of the quietest forms of power a person can develop. Nothing dramatic happens. No confrontation, no announcement, no final speech. You simply stop carrying people mentally after they have stopped adding value to your life. And with that, a burden you barely noticed you've been carrying begins to disappear. Eventually, you discover that being understood was never the thing you were truly looking for. What you wanted was permission. Permission to trust your own judgment. Permission to move forward without guilt. Permission to stop carrying expectations that were never yours to begin with. The reason this search lasts so long is because most people keep asking others for permission that can only be granted internally. They keep waiting for understanding to create certainty. But certainty rarely arrives from the outside. It emerges the moment you decide that your own clarity is enough. And that decision changes the way you move through the world. The strange thing is that once you stop needing to be understood, people often begin understanding you more. Not because you became more persuasive, but because you became more honest. You are no longer tailoring every word to avoid misunderstanding. You are no longer constantly adjusting yourself to fit someone else's expectations. There is a clarity that emerges when you stop speaking from need. Your words become simpler. Your boundaries become cleaner. Your decisions become easier to explain because they no longer require a lengthy defense. And whether people agree with them or not becomes increasingly irrelevant. This is why truly independent people often appear mysterious, not because they are hiding something, but because they no longer feel compelled to explain everything. Most people assume transparency means constant explanation. It doesn't. There is a difference between being honest and being endlessly accessible. One comes from integrity. The other often comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of being judged, fear of disappointing someone. The moment you stop needing to manage those fears through explanation, you become more selective with your words. And that selectiveness is often mistaken for strength, because in many ways it is. The final stage is not learning to tolerate being misunderstood. It is recognizing that being misunderstood is an unavoidable cost of living authentically. Every person who has ever developed a strong identity has faced it. The moment you make decisions based on your values instead of other people's expectations, some people will misinterpret you. The moment you choose boundaries over approval, some people will call you selfish. The moment you stop explaining yourself endlessly, some people will call you distant. The question is no longer how to avoid misunderstanding. The question becomes whether you are willing to pay the price of being yourself. And once you reach that point, something unexpected happens. The need to be understood doesn't disappear because you forced it away. It disappears because you finally see what it was costing you. You see the years spent over-explaining, the energy spent defending yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, the nights spent replaying conversations that changed nothing, the emotional weight of carrying opinions that were never yours to manage. And for the first time, you understand that peace was never waiting on the other side of someone else's understanding. It was waiting on the other side of your willingness to stop needing it. Most people spend their lives believing freedom comes from finding the right people, the people who understand them, support them, approve of them. But real freedom begins when you no longer need those things in order to remain at peace with yourself. The moment you stop needing to be understood is not the moment people finally see you clearly. It is the moment you realize they don't have to, because your confidence no longer depends on their perception. Your direction no longer depends on their approval, and your peace no longer depends on their agreement. What once felt like rejection becomes noise. What once felt like judgment becomes information. What once felt like a burden becomes irrelevant. And in that quiet shift, you gain something far more valuable than understanding. you gain ownership of your own mind. The paradox is that the people who command the most respect are often the least concerned with securing it. They are not constantly monitoring how they are perceived. They are not exhausting themselves trying to correct every misunderstanding. They are focused on living in alignment with what they know to be true. This is why they appear grounded. Their identity is anchored internally, rather than negotiated externally. And when you stop treating other people's understanding as proof of your worth, you begin building the same foundation. A foundation that cannot be shaken every time someone fails to see you the way you see yourself. What makes this transformation so powerful is that it doesn't require you to become harder, colder, or less human. It requires you to become less dependent. There is a difference. A cold person closes themselves off because they fear being hurt. An independent person remains open while accepting that not everyone will understand them. One is driven by fear, the other is driven by acceptance. And the moment you understand this distinction, you stop confusing emotional independence with emotional withdrawal. True strength is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to feel deeply without surrendering control of yourself to the reactions of others. In the end, the moment you stop needing to be understood is not really about other people at all. It is about ending a negotiation you've been having with yourself for years. The negotiation that says, I can trust my judgment once enough people agree with it. The negotiation that says, I can move forward once everyone sees my side. The negotiation that says, I can be at peace once they finally understand. But peace does not arrive through unanimous approval. It arrives when you stop placing your self-worth, your confidence, and your direction in the hands of people who were never qualified to determine them. And that is why the moment you stop needing to be understood is often the moment you finally begin to understand yourself. There is a reason this realization feels so unsettling at first. If you've spent years measuring your emotional stability through other people's responses, then letting go of that habit can feel like stepping into uncertainty. You may even feel selfish, detached, wrong. But what you're actually experiencing is the discomfort of reclaiming responsibility for your own inner state. For a long time, you were trying to build certainty through agreement. Now you are learning to build it through self-trust. And self-trust always feels unfamiliar before it feels natural. And perhaps that is the deepest truth hidden beneath all of this. The need to be understood was never really about communication. It was about certainty. You believed that if enough people understood you, you could finally stop questioning yourself. But certainty built on other people's perceptions is fragile, because their perceptions are always changing. One day they admire you, the next day they criticize you. One day they agree, the next day they don't. If your confidence depends on their understanding, then your confidence rises and falls with forces you cannot control. The moment you see this clearly, you stop searching for stability in other people's minds and start building it within your own. And once you stop searching for stability in other people's minds, you begin noticing opportunities that were previously hidden from you. You speak more honestly because you are no longer calculating how every word will be received. You make decisions faster because you are no longer waiting for universal approval. You set boundaries more cleanly because you are no longer trying to make them impossible for others to criticize. Life becomes simpler, not because people become easier, but because you stop treating their understanding as a condition for your action. And in that simplicity, there is a quiet kind of power that many people spend their entire lives searching for without ever finding. The people who never learn this lesson often remain trapped in the same cycle for decades. They continue explaining themselves to people who have no intention of understanding. They continue defending decisions that require no defense. They continue carrying misunderstandings as though they are debts that must be repaid. And because of this, they never fully become themselves. A part of their identity remains permanently outsourced to the opinions of others. But the moment you stop participating in that cycle, something shifts. You stop living as a reaction to other people's perceptions and start living as an expression of your own convictions. That is not arrogance, it is maturity, and very few people ever reach it. The truth is that most people will spend their lives trying to be understood. A much smaller number will learn to understand themselves. The first path leads to endless negotiation. The second leads to freedom. Because when you no longer need other people to confirm who you are, defend what you value, or approve of the direction you're taking, something inside you becomes remarkably still. And in a world filled with people desperately trying to control how they are perceived, that stillness becomes a rare advantage. Not because it makes you better than others, but because it makes you harder to move, harder to manipulate, and far more difficult to pull away from yourself. And that is why the moment you stop needing to be understood is not a loss. It is a release. A release from the exhausting responsibility of managing other people's perceptions. A release from the belief that your peace must be earned through explanation. A release from the hope that one more conversation will finally give you permission to trust yourself. Some people will understand you, some never will. Let them. Your life becomes lighter the moment you realize that understanding is a gift, not a requirement. Because the day your peace no longer depends on being understood is the day it finally becomes yours. If there's one thing to take away from this video, it's that peace begins the moment you stop asking other people for permission to trust yourself. The need to be understood often feels noble, but more often it becomes a hidden dependency that quietly controls your emotions, your decisions, and your confidence. If you'd like to go deeper into these ideas, my free ebook, The Art of Strategic Indifference, is the natural next step. It's written specifically for people who are working toward emotional independence and a stronger relationship with themselves, and you'll find it in the description. I'm curious, what was harder for you to let go of, being misunderstood, or the hope that one day certain people would finally understand you? If you genuinely found value in this video, consider leaving a like. And if you're interested in emotional independence, strategic thinking, human nature, power dynamics, discipline, and self-mastery, subscribe and stay with us. The next recommended video expands this philosophy even further, and I think you'll find it particularly relevant after what we've discussed today. And for those who want to explore the deepest layers of these ideas, you'll also find a link to Patreon in the description. Patreon is where I share private material created for people who are serious about mastering these concepts, including observations, psychological breakdowns, and ideas that are intentionally not structured for public platforms. It's less like a membership and more like a private circle of serious thinkers who want to understand themselves, human nature, and the hidden dynamics that shape life. Both the ebook and Patreon links are in the description if you'd like to continue the journey.